VGC is supported by Patreon. Check out patreon.com/videogameschronicle for more podcasts, ad-free browsing, and extra content. Thank you for your support. This was asked by Ryan Cobain, one of our season ticket holders at patreon.com/videogameschronicle. How has the media changed since you joined it?
So when I joined in May 2006, and it was like 6 months before the Wii came out, so it was like around about that time. And Official Nintendo magazine was only like a couple of issues old. The Future Publishing had just got the license from EMAP, who'd been doing the Official Nintendo magazine for years before that. They get into a bit of bother with Nintendo, I think, for leaking the Game Boy Advance specs. Nintendo will let what you do. So that kind of ended that deal. So we took over. So when I took over, it was still in that situation where magazines were it was the very start of the discussion about magazines starting to go down hill. We didn't see it initially because as a Nintendo magazine our numbers were going up as the Wii was coming out. So while other magazines were saying our figures are going down, our ABC figures are going down every 6 months or whatever, ours were going up and then kind of staying steady for a while because the Wii was popular. So we had a website, like every magazine had their own website at that time, but it was kind of, no one gave a shit. Really, it had to be there.
Were there people at that time saying, hey, maybe we should actually, while working on the magazine, transition some of this focus to the web? Or was it like by the time you thought of that, it was too late, do you think?
It was more for us personally. I mean, other mags tried to do that because the magazine editorial staff was kind of had that mentality, that mindset of the magazine is a thing. Yeah. The website felt like almost just something that you had to have sometimes. So we needed to have a website as part of our deal with Nintendo. Part of the official Nintendo magazine offering was that we would have a website as well. But people mainly used that for the forum. The forum was like really thriving there. Nobody obviously uses forums these days because they don't really exist anymore that much. But yeah, obviously we had CVG was there, and we worked alongside CVG at the time. So they were the site. And you had Games Radar in Bath as well, to future London and Bath offices. So those were the sites, and then the magazines kind of almost operated as separate things. And if they had site-worthy stories, they would usually send them to either CVG or Games Radar rather than putting them on their own sites. Our O&M site was really just a kind of news roundup rather than anything, any scoops or anything like that.
In terms of the audience, when you were starting out in the mags, did you find that it was a lot of kind of younger players, a lot of hardcores? Because obviously the Nintendo fan base has changed and morphed, I think, especially in the internet era, like from the end of the Wii U, from the end of the Wii through the Wii U into the start of the Switch. That seemed like a real kind of transitional period where a lot of console allegiances were decided. But who were the people that were on those forums that were picking up the magazine every week?
It's weird because you could see a change over time, because obviously when I started, we were at the arse end of the GameCube, and it was the dregs of what was being released. So like I was doing like 4-page reviews of the Ant Bully on Game Boy Advance and shit like that. All terrible movie tie-ins like Monster House and the GameCube and that. So at that point the readership was fairly low, but it was like the hardest of hardcore. These are the sort of people who would still cling to the Wii U. Like later down the years. So these are the people who were adamant that the GameCube was still the thing, even though it was flatlining. But obviously then when the Wii came out, like a number of months later, suddenly we got an entirely new audience of parents buying the magazine for their kids so their kids could see what Wii game was coming out. So our audience skewed a bit younger than like the official Xbox magazine or OPM. But it was an interesting one because we had a balance to reach, because we were still trying to keep those Nintendo hardcore. So I was constantly doing retro articles and stuff to kind of keep them on board. But it was strange. We had a less hardcore following, despite being a Nintendo publication, than the others did.
When you started, what was the relationship like between the games media and the game companies themselves? Because obviously you were just about to go into a phase where PRs and games publishers were thinking, perhaps the traditional media isn't the approach we want to take. There was a much bigger focus on YouTubers and content creators, and they were getting access that would traditionally have went to the mainstream games press, dwindling as it was. So what was it like then, and what was there any kind of moment where you thought, oh, the tide is turning here somewhat?
It's weird because obviously when I started, 2006, YouTube was very, very young.
Mm.
Wikipedia was very, very young. Like I wish I'd had Wikipedia earlier to help at uni, but it was very, very basic at the time. So like YouTubers weren't a thing. Like I actually started a video series, like a Q&A video series at Official Nintendo magazine, and it went on Yahoo Video because
Nice.
that was the best. That was the best thing it could go on at the time. So technically, I was one of the first YouTubers before YouTube existed. I wish I'd stuck with it. I'd be making millions now. But no, so at the time, YouTubers weren't even in our thought process. It was magazines versus websites. That was our thing. And in terms of working with the companies, you'd hear horror stories from like the 90s era where like by all accounts it sounded like corruption was slightly more rife back then.
Yeah.
And I say corruption, not even that. It's just a case of like pals covering their games,
Jobs for the boys kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And back then also stuff like as I understand it, like if you got pally with an importer, and whatever games they could get you was the games you would review that week, that month, and you would put in a wee wink with thanks to so and so import, and they get their gig out of it. By the time I came, the only real kind of deals that were done with publishers, there was never like money changing hands, because that's the other big thing that people seem to think, especially at an official publication. Oh, Nintendo, you just do what Nintendo told you. That wasn't really the case. You would usually agree what the cover is going to be. And usually you would have to tell the publisher involved, the game publisher, because you needed bespoke art for the cover. So you had to tell them, look, we're going to put this in the cover. Can you give us some artwork to go on the cover? And that's usually it. And on very rare occasions, I think this happened 2 or 3 times. I need to go back to which ones were. They would help us with financing the cover, because we'd give it a special cover, like a shiny cover or a spot varnish, they called it. You know when you get a cover where there's like a character on the cover and the character feels glossy, but the rest of the cover wasn't. That was called spot varnish.
It changes if you hold it under light, like it's a different.
You kind of you hold the light, it reflects the lights, as we did that. But by and large, other than that, it was just normal dealings, like the stuff we would deal with just now. As the game's coming out, we'd contact for review code, get sent preview code, review code. That was really it. It was obviously when YouTubers came around, the dynamic changed, because now I was freelance at the time when it really kicked in. So I was doing my Tired Old Hack website after CVG closed down, and that's when I could tell the tide was turning, because when I first started that, I was still getting review code from like Rockstar sent me Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm like, what? My wee shit muncher site. But then over just the course of a couple of years, that died and YouTubers started coming up, because that the influencer culture. But yeah, it's weird for me as well, because obviously I've been coming up for 20 years doing this now, and seeing how it's changed has been like crazy, because obviously when I started, like I say, magazines were still quite heavily the thing. And to have gone, I've covered the big 3 now. I've done magazines, I've done websites, I've done freelance, and like they've all got their own strengths and weaknesses. Like freelance is the most obvious weaknesses, in that you're never guaranteed a gig from week to week. I loved the time you could take with doing a magazine. Because like, although I ultimately ended up writing most of the magazine every month, because I like wrote like an absolute beast, there was still like this feeling of like, I can spend an entire day or 2 on this feature, and there's no rush, as long as, because the deadlines were always monthly deadlines, whereas the website culture, I think, can grind you down a lot quicker. Because like it's day to day to day to day. Like the end of a work day ends, and you go, oh, and then the next day starts, and you go, fuck. Just like everything, you can't actually down tools that much. So I'm massively diverting from what you originally said.
No, I think going forward, the future of where it's headed, or kind of where we are already at and where we're finding ourselves a bit more comfortable, is this more bespoke content for people that really want it. There is the website, which essentially serves as part news website for people, part shop front for the stuff that we're doing, like behind the Patreon wall. So I think we're in a comfortable position, thanks to you lot on patreon.com/Video Games Chronicle. So we'll keep an eye out. But thank you very much for your question, Ryan.